Have you ever looked up at the night sky and felt small? A tiny, fragile speck in a cosmos so vast and dark it feels like it could swallow you whole? We've all felt it. That quiet, humming fear that in the grand scheme of things, we just don't matter. That we're alone. But what if we were wrong? What if the universe wasn't empty but full? And what if everything out there was infinitely older, stronger, and more terrifying than we could ever imagine? For decades that was our nightmare. The first contact war wasn't a war at all. It was a slaughter. An unstoppable alien armada swept through our colonies, not for conquest, not for resources, but for something far colder: eradication. They called us a genetic flaw. A mistake in an otherwise orderly universe. A cancer to be cut out. And we were losing. System by system, world by world, hope by hope. Our greatest ships were like toys against their warforms. Our most powerful weapons just scratched their hulls. We were on the brink of extinction, huddled on a dying Earth, waiting for the final blow to fall. The silence from the stars was no longer a mystery, it was a verdict. We were alone and we were finished. Then we found it. It wasn't in some distant star system. It was right here in our own solar system, buried under the red sands of Mars. A relic. A ship, but unlike anything we or the aliens had ever built. It was old, impossibly old. A silent, sleeping giant from a time before life had even crawled out of Earth's oceans. It wasn't human. But it was familiar. The project to understand it, to wake it, was called Guardian. The brightest minds we had left worked in desperation, while the war raged just outside our atmosphere. We learned its systems were biological, in a way, but fused with technology on a level we couldn't comprehend. It didn't have a cockpit. It had a throne. And it didn't have controls. It had a neural interface. It was built for a pilot. But not for a human one. We tried everything. AIs, virtual intelligences, remote links. Nothing worked. The ship remained silent, a monument to our failure. Until one day, a young technician, a bioengineer who had lost everything to the war, his family, his home, was working on the interface cabling. There was an accident. A power surge. A flash of light. And for a single, blinding second, his mind was connected to the machine. He described it later. It wasn't like operating a vehicle. It was like putting on a second skin. A skin made of stars and cold metal. He felt the ship's immense age, its deep, programmed sorrow, and its singular, overwhelming purpose: to protect. But the connection was too much. It almost burned his mind out. He survived, but he was left different, hollowed out. That's when we realized we couldn't operate it. A human mind couldn't handle the raw data flow. We would need to give ourselves to it completely. It would need a pilot who would surrender their very consciousness to become the ship's soul. A permanent fusion. A sacrifice. They asked for volunteers. They didn't get many. Who would give up their humanity to become a weapon? To become a thing? To die but keep on living? They found one. A broken soldier, a man with nothing left to lose but the memory of what he was fighting for. He didn't do it for glory. He didn't do it for duty. He did it because it was the only card left to play. The process, we still don't understand it. There was no flashy light show. Just a silent, terrible moment as he sat on that throne and the living metal of the ship reached up and embraced him. His body didn't move again. But on the monitors the ship woke up. Its engines, dormant for 1 billion years, ignited with a light that didn't seem to belong to our universe. We called it Sentinel. And it went to war. For the first time the alien advance stopped. Not just stopped, it was thrown back. The Sentinel didn't fight like us. It didn't fire missiles or lasers. It rewrote local physics. It turned their weapons into dust. It unmade their ships at a molecular level. It was a god of war and it was on our side. We cheered. We cried. We dared to hope for the first time in a generation. This ancient, unknowable machine was our savior. Our warrior. But that's the thing about ancient, unknowable machines. You never really know what they're thinking. Or if they're thinking. The pilot inside, was he still in there? Was he screaming? Was he at peace? Or had he simply been overwritten? We told ourselves it didn't matter. He was a hero. A martyr. The weapon was working. Until the day it didn't. The alien armada, beaten back to the edge of the solar system, committed their entire fleet to one final, massive counterattack. 1 billion ships against our one ancient guardian. The battle was a chaos of light and silence. The Sentinel fought like we'd never seen, but it was being overwhelmed. We watched from Earth, our hearts in our throats, praying for a miracle. And then, it happened. The Sentinel did something new. It didn't counterattack. It didn't raise a shield. It reached out not with a weapon but with something else. A field of energy that enveloped the entire alien fleet. And then, it began to broadcast. Not a message of war. Not a warning. It broadcast a memory. A single human memory. The volunteer's memory. The moment he said goodbye to his daughter, before he left for a war he knew he wouldn't come back from. The feel of her small hand in his. The sound of her laugh. The simple, crushing, beautiful love of a father for his child. A feeling so purely, uniquely human, it was utterly alien to them. The alien fleet stopped. Every ship. Every single one. They just hung there in the void, completely motionless. The firing ceased. The war just ended. And now we don't know what to do. The Sentinel hangs in orbit, silent once more. The alien armada is still out there, just sitting at the edge of the Oort cloud. They're not attacking. They're not communicating. They're just waiting. We sent a ship to try and make contact with the Sentinel, to try and understand what it did, what it is now. The boarding team is about to cross the threshold. They're about to step inside the quiet, dark halls of that billion-year-old ship. They're going to look for the pilot's chamber. They're going to look for the man who saved us all. What will they find? Is the man we sent in there still alive? Is he a ghost in the machine? Or did he become something else entirely? And what about the aliens? What did that memory do to them? Was it a weapon we never knew we had? Or was it something else? He was never just a warrior. He was a father. A memory. A feeling. And maybe, just maybe, that was the one thing the cold, dark universe couldn't defeat. He wasn't their warrior. But he was ours. The airlock door hissed shut behind them, sealing with a finality that made everyone jump. Inside the Sentinel, the silence was a physical thing. It was heavier than the vacuum outside, thick and ancient and waiting. The only sound was the rasp of their own breath inside their helmets, the scuff of magnetic boots on a floor that wasn't quite metal, wasn't quite stone, but felt strangely warm through the soles of their suits. This was it. The belly of the beast. The heart of our salvation. And it was terrifying. Lieutenant Cora Verma led the team, her hand resting on the sidearm she knew was useless down here. What was she going to shoot? The walls? Her orders were simple. Get to the central chamber, assess the status of the volunteer, and try to establish any form of communication. Simple. The kind of order command gives when they have no idea what you're walking into. The corridor they were in was enormous, arching high overhead into shadow. The walls weren't smooth, they were organic, fibrous, like the inside of a giant seashell, threaded with pulsing lines of soft blue light that seemed to flow like blood. It felt less like walking through a ship and more like walking through the veins of some sleeping leviathan. You could feel its age, a profound, weary oldness that pressed down on your soul. This thing was ancient when our planet was still molten rock. Readings are off the chart, Lieutenant, a voice crackled in her ear. It was Dr. Eris, the Xenotech specialist, his voice tight with a mixture of fear and utter fascination. The energy signature isn't electrical. It's biological. Neural. It's like the entire ship is a living brain. And it's active. Not dormant. Dreaming. The word sent a chill through the team. What did a billion-year-old machine dream about? They moved deeper, the passageway sloping gently downward. There were no control panels, no screens, no buttons. Nothing a human engineer would recognize. It was disorienting. How did you navigate a place that had no map? They were following the strongest energy signal, a beacon on their scanners that led them toward the core. Verma's mind kept drifting back to the volunteer. The files on him were sparse, heavily redacted. A lot of it was guesswork. He'd been a civil engineer before the war, someone who built bridges and homes, not someone who destroyed things. He had a daughter. That was the one unredacted human detail that stood out. A little girl, maybe 8 years old when he stepped into this. She'd be grown now. Did she know her father was the soul inside this celestial titan? Did she look up at the sky and wonder? Contact. A voice whispered over the comms. It was Reyes on point. He was frozen, his rifle light pointed at a section of the wall. They all stopped, hearts hammering. The wall here was different. The fiber structures wove together into something that looked like a vast, intricate tapestry. And within it, frozen in the living material, were images. Not carved. Not projected. Grown. They were scenes. A cityscape under a yellow sun, not one any of them recognized. Strange, elegant beings looking up at a sky filled with strange, beautiful constellations. Then, images of a great darkness, a consuming swarm that blotted out the stars. A war. The same kind of war we were losing. This was its history. The Sentinel's origin. It was a record keeper. A rememberer. It fought them before, Dr. Eris breathed, his voice full of awe. It fought the same enemy. And it lost. Its creators, they're gone. It's the last of its kind. We didn't find a weapon. We found a tomb. A monument to a dead race. The weight of that realization settled over them. This wasn't just a machine. It was a relic of a long-extinct civilization, a final, grieving testament to a war they lost millennia ago. And we, in our desperation, had shoved one of our own into its heart and told it to fight again. The corridor finally opened into a vast, cavernous space. The central chamber. In the center of the room, on a raised dais, was the throne. And on it sat the volunteer. He was encased just as the report said. A sculpture of that same warm, living metal climbed up his legs, wrapped around his torso and crept over his shoulders. His head was tilted back, his eyes closed. He looked peaceful, like he was sleeping. Wires and organic filaments, like silver ivy, connected from the throne into ports at the base of his skull. His chest rose and fell in a slow, steady rhythm. He was alive. After all this time, he was still biologically alive. But was he in there? A console of sorts, a swirling organic mound of material, stood a few feet from the base of the throne. Dr. Eris approached it, his hands trembling. The neural interface is still active. The feedback loop is immense. It's a miracle his mind wasn't vaporized in the first second. He connected a portable diagnostic unit. Data streamed across his screen, a chaotic waterfall of information. I'm reading two distinct patterns. One is the ship. Vast, ancient patterns of thought I can't even begin to parse. It's like listening to the echo of a galaxy. The other, it's him. It's human. But it's fragmented. Weaved into the other. They're not two things anymore. They're. He trailed off, his face pale in the glow of his screen. They're what, doctor? Verma asked, her voice barely a whisper. Before he could answer, the chamber trembled. Not a violent shake, but a deep, resonant thrum, like the string of a colossal cello being plucked. The soft blue light in the walls flared brighter, the pulses quickening. On his diagnostic screen, the two neural patterns suddenly spiked, synchronizing perfectly for a single terrifying second. And on the throne, the volunteer's eyes snapped open. They didn't look human anymore. They glowed with the same soft, ancient blue light that pulsed through the ship. They were windows into a vast and lonely intelligence. His head turned, slowly, the living metal at his neck creaking softly. Those impossible eyes looked past the armed soldiers, past the terrified scientist, and locked directly onto Lieutenant Verma. His lips parted. A dry, rasping sound came out, a voice that hadn't been used in years, filtered through something immense and alien. And it spoke a single clear word. Daughter? The word hung in the air between them, fragile and immense. Daughter. It wasn't a question. It was a recognition. A memory-given sound. Lieutenant Verma stood frozen, her hand still on her sidearm, every muscle locked. The voice was wrong. It was the volunteers. She'd heard the old mission recordings, but it was layered, echoed by something vast and ancient. It was like hearing a single voice and a chorus of stars all at once. Behind her, Dr. Eris was whispering frantic updates to command, his voice a terrified buzz in her earpiece. Significant energy surge, neural activity is off the scale, it's not hostile, repeat, not hostile, but the readings, I've never seen anything like. She blocked him out. All that existed was the man on the throne and that one heartbreaking word. Sir? Verma finally managed, her own voice a dry crackle. Can you hear me? Do you know where you are? The glowing eyes blinked, slowly. The head tilted, a gesture that was almost but not quite human. The living metal encasing him seemed to shift and flow with the movement like water. Where? The voice rasped, the sound of stone grinding on stone. Everywhere. Nowhere. The silence was long. The eyes focused on her again, and for a flicker, the blue light seemed to soften. You are not her. You are the same shape. The same fear. The same love. He was seeing them not as soldiers, not as intruders, but as echoes of his own humanity. The ship, the Sentinel, was showing him their emotional signatures, their histories, the way a human might feel the heat from a stove. The war, Verma pressed, taking a cautious step forward. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. The alien fleet. They've stopped. What did you do? How did you stop them? A deep, resonant hum vibrated through the deck plates, rising from the throne. It was the ship responding to his thoughts. They are listeners, the fused consciousness said, the words coming easier now as if it was remembering how to speak. They only understand the language of efficiency, of purity. They are a storm that cuts away the weak, the imperfect. They thought we were noise. An error to be deleted. He shifted, and the sound was like a mountain moving. I showed them a memory. Not a weapon. A pattern. A feeling. A father's love for his child. It is illogical. It is inefficient. It is consuming and messy, and it is the one thing their logic cannot process. It does not compute. To them, it is the most alien thing in this universe. It caused a division in their consensus. A fault line in their single mind. Dr. Eris gasped. A paradox. He didn't fight them. He gave them a philosophical virus. A concept they can't resolve. But they're still out there, Verma said, her mind reeling. They're just waiting. What are they waiting for? The figure on the throne grew very still. The blue light in his eyes intensified, flickering with something that looked like pain. They are analyzing the data, he whispered, and the fear in his voice was entirely human. They are running the paradox through their entire network, trying to solve it, to categorize it. They will either adapt, or they will conclude it is an existential threat that must be purged at its source. Their entire armada is a single brain, and right now it is thinking about us, about what we are. The sheer scale of it was dizzying. The fate of humanity wasn't resting on a battle anymore, but on a single thought in a mind as vast as a solar system. And you? Verma asked, her voice softening despite her terror. What are you? Are you still in there? Can you come back? A profound sadness seemed to fill the chamber. The light in the walls dimmed. The man I was is a leaf on a great river, he said, his voice thick with a grief that was millennia old. His memories are my memories. His love is my purpose. But the river is the sentinel. It is old and it is tired and it has seen its children die. It does not want to be a warrior anymore. It chose me not for my strength but for my humanity. To remember what it feels like to have something to lose. He looked down at his metallic hands, a gesture of heartbreaking familiarity. I am the bridge. I am the wound and the bandage. I can feel the alien mind out there, grinding away at the concept of love. I can feel their confusion turning into something else. Something colder. Suddenly the entire ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared on Dr. Eris's console, red lights flashing across his face. They're moving, he yelled, his voice cracking with panic. The Armada. They're not waiting anymore. They're shifting formation, focusing their entire energy signature on us. They've reached a conclusion. On the throne, the volunteer's body went rigid. His back arched against the living metal and a sound tore from his throat that was part human scream, part tearing metal, part cosmic static. The blue light in his eyes blazed like twin supernovas. The silence is a lie, he roared, his voice now a terrifying fusion of the man and the machine, filled with agony and defiance. They have chosen. They have chosen purge. They are coming. They are coming to erase the error. To erase us. The ship around them came alive with a deafening, psychic scream of raw power. The organic strands on the walls glowed white-hot. The hum became a deafening roar. The sentinel was awakening fully, not to defend but to fight for its very existence. Verma stumbled back, raising her arm against the blinding light. This was it. The storm was breaking. The alien armada, 1 billion ships strong, was finally coming to finish what they started. And they were trapped inside the one thing in the universe they had left to protect them. A weapon that was tired of war, piloted by the fading echo of a man who just wanted to go home to his little girl. The final battle was about to begin. And it wouldn't be fought with guns and missiles. It would be fought with a memory, a feeling. The last, desperate stand of a human heart against the cold, silent logic of the void. The scream of the ship wasn't a sound you heard with your ears. It was a vibration that started in your teeth, rattled your bones, and clawed at the inside of your skull. The gentle blue glow in the chamber walls erupted into a searing, painful white. Lieutenant Verma threw up a hand, shielding her visor from the glare, her heart hammering against her ribs like it wanted to escape. On the throne, the volunteer was a silhouette against a star, his body rigid, back arched in agony. The ancient metal that held him seemed to be melting and reforming, flowing over him like a second skin, responding to the threat. The voice that came out of him was no longer a blend of man and machine. It was a raw, shredded thing, pure pain-given sound. They're not just coming for us, he screamed, the words tearing out of him. They've seen it. They've seen the memory. They know it's a weakness, a fault line. They're going to. He convulsed, a shudder racking his entire frame. The white light flickered, and for a horrifying second, Verma saw his face clearly, Not the god of war, not the ancient sentinel, but just a man, terrified and utterly broken. "They're going to burn it out," he cried, his voice cracking with a grief so profound it felt like the chamber itself was weeping. "They're going to scour his memory from existence. They're going to delete her. They're going to make him forget. They're going to make me forget." The revelation hit Verma like a physical blow. This wasn't an invasion. It wasn't a battle for territory or survival. It was an assassination of a soul. The aliens, in their cold, brutal logic, had identified the source of the illogical paradox, the love of a father for his child, and were coming to surgically remove it. To reset the system. To turn their one fragile weapon back into just a machine. An empty shell. And they would do it by murdering the last thing that made him human. "We have to stop them," Dr. Eris yelled, his fingers flying over his console, data streaming in a frantic, useless river. The energy buildup. It's not a weapon. It's a targeted psionic pulse. They're going to hit this ship with a wave designed to do one thing. Wipe specific neural pathways. They're going to perform a lobotomy across 1,000,000 miles of space. The stakes had just been ripped from the cosmic and made horrifyingly, intimately personal. This wasn't about saving Earth anymore. It was about saving him. Saving the memory of a little girl's laugh. Saving the feel of a small hand in his. It was about protecting the one thing that had saved them all, not the weapon but the love inside it. The Sentinel, the volunteer gasped, fighting for every word against the tidal wave of incoming data. It's old, its systems, they're not just for war. They're for preservation. For memory. It's a library, a tomb for a dead race. It wants to protect the memory, but it doesn't know how. It only knows how to fight. And fighting won't stop this. The truth dawned on Verma, cold and clear and terrifying. The ancient ship, for all its power, was out of its depth. It was a warrior facing a philosopher. A scalpel. It could unmake 1,000,000,000 ships, but how do you fight an idea? How do you shield a feeling? "It needs a human solution," she whispered, the idea forming even as she said it. "Not a weapon. A shield." She turned to Dr. Eris, her eyes wild. The memory he showed them. The memory of his daughter. Is it stored? Can we access it? Eris looked at her like she was mad. It's woven into the entire ship's core consciousness. It's part of its fundamental programming now. But we can't fight with it. We're not going to fight. Verma shouted over the rising scream of the ship. We're going to remind them. All of them. If they want to delete one memory, we show them 1,000,000,000 more. We flood their network. We don't give them a single paradox. We give them a universe of them. She looked back at the throne, at the man trapped in a battle for his own soul. You're not a river. You're a man. And you're not alone. We are going to give you every reason to remember. Every single one. On her command channel, she opened a fleet-wide broadcast, her voice breaking with a desperate, fierce hope. This is Lieutenant Verma aboard the Sentinel. To every ship, every station, every person listening on Earth. I need you to listen. They're not trying to destroy our ship. They're trying to destroy our reason for fighting. They're trying to make us forget what we're protecting. She took a shuddering breath, pouring every ounce of her conviction into the mic. I need you to send it. I need you to open every channel, use every scrap of bandwidth we have left, and send them your reason. Send them the memory of your first kiss. The sound of your mother's voice. The feeling of rain on your face. The stupid, messy, illogical, beautiful love that makes us human. Don't send a weapon. Send them a love letter. 1,000,000,000 love letters. Flood them with us. For a second there was nothing but the ship's scream. Then a trickle at first, then a flood, a tsunami of raw, unfiltered human data began to pour into the Sentinel systems. Family videos, birthday messages, love songs, whispered secrets, wedding vows, the joy of a goal scored, the quiet comfort of a shared look, every fragile, precious moment that defined a life. The ship shuddered again, but this time it was different. The white light softened, pulsing with 1,000 new colors. The scream lowered to a resonant, thrumming chord. On the throne, the volunteer's body relaxed just a fraction. A single tear, real and human, traced a path through the dust on his cheek, cutting a clean line through the ancient metal. He looked at Verma, and in his eyes, the blinding blue had receded, replaced by a flicker of something warm, something grateful. They're listening, he breathed. The alien armada hung in the void, poised to fire the pulse that would erase a father's love from the universe. And humanity, broken, desperate, and out of options, answered not with a roar of defiance, but with a whisper. 1,000,000,000 whispers. Of home. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. It was the silence of a universe holding its breath. On the throne, the volunteer's face was a mask of concentration, his eyes closed, the tears still wet on his cheeks. The chaotic storm of human experience, a billion love letters poured into the void, flowed through him. He was no longer just a man or a ship. He was a conduit. A living, feeling nerve center for the entire human soul. The alien armada hung motionless, a billion dark knives against the starfield. Their focused energy, the psionic scalpel meant to carve out a single memory, seemed to waver. The sheer, overwhelming weight of what was being transmitted was too much. It was noise. It was chaos. It was illogical. It was everything they were built to erase. But you can't erase a tide. Verma watched the main display on Dr. Eris's console, her knuckles white. The energy signature of the alien pulse was still building, a terrifying wave of pure data designed to sterilize, to simplify. It was a delete command for the human heart. "It's not enough," Eris whispered, his voice hollow. "The pulse is still primed. They're going to fire. Our signal, it's just background static to them. They're filtering it out, focusing only on the core memory he first showed them. They're still going to target it." The volunteer's eyes snapped open. They weren't glowing with alien power anymore. They were just tired, set, and filled with a final, desperate resolve. "They see the love as a flaw," he said, his voice quiet, almost peaceful amidst the building storm. "A bug in the system. They cannot understand that it is the source code. The Sentinel's creators made the same mistake. They built it to protect memory, but they gave it only weapons. They forgot to give it a heart." He looked directly at Verma, and in that look she saw the man he had been. The father. The bridge builder. "A weapon cannot protect a memory," he said. "Only another memory can." He tilted his head back and a final, powerful shudder went through the ship. But this wasn't a surge of weapons or shields. The pulsing lights in the walls softened, shifting from fierce white to a deep, warm gold. The hum of the engines faded into a low, gentle thrum, like a heartbeat slowing. He wasn't fighting back. He was letting go. He was opening the Sentinel's core archives. Not its weapons. Its memories. What is he doing? Eris breathed, watching his screens in utter confusion. He's powering down every defensive system. He's opening every data port. He's making us completely vulnerable. And then they saw it. The Sentinel began to broadcast a new signal. Not a human one. It was the ship's own memory. The history of its long-dead creators. Not their wars. Not their technology. Their art. A symphony of light and mathematics that described the feeling of a twin sunrise on a dead world. The scent of a forgotten flower, translated into a complex equation of sorrow and beauty. The poetry of a species that had loved and created and wondered, long before they had ever learned to hate and destroy. The love letters of a dead race. He was showing the aliens the one thing their brutal, logical programming could never comprehend. He was showing them the ghost in the machine. The reason the machine was built in the first place. The targeted psionic pulse from the Armada finally launched. A silent, invisible wave of pure negation shot across the void, aimed directly at the Sentinel's heart. It hit. And nothing happened. The wave of nothingness washed over the ship, seeking the specific memory of a human father and his child. But it couldn't find it. It was lost, now buried and protected within a galaxy of other memories. It was a single leaf in an infinite forest. A single note in a symphony of existence. The delete command had nothing to delete. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing changed. The Armada hung there. The Sentinel was silent, its lights dim, seemingly dead in the water. Then a single ship in the vast alien Armada winked out. It didn't explode. It didn't drift away. It simply vanished. One moment it was there, a part of the perfect, terrible whole. The next it was gone. Then another. And another. Silent, peaceful, and absolute. It wasn't an attack. It was a dissolution. "What's happening?" Verma asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Eris was staring at his screens, his face a portrait of awe. The paradox, it's not a virus anymore. It's a truth. They were a collective consciousness, right? A single mind. And that mind just encountered an idea it could not process, could not delete, and could not ignore. The idea that creation is more complex than destruction. That love is a stronger organizing principle than efficiency. He looked up, his eyes wide. It's not killing them. It's enlightening them. And for a mind built only on pure, simple logic, enlightenment is a terminal condition. They are achieving a logical clarity. And it is annihilating them. One by one, like candles being snuffed out, the ships of the alien armada simply ceased to exist. There was no fury, no grand explosion. Just a quiet, peaceful end to a long, cold war. The silence that returned was different this time. It was the silence of deep space, natural and calm. The threat was gone. On the throne, the volunteer slumped forward. The living metal that encased him began to recede, pulling back from his body like a tide going out, leaving him pale and gaunt, but human. So utterly human. He was breathing shallowly. Verma rushed to his side, fumbling with the seals on her helmet, finally pulling it off. The air in the chamber was cool and smelled of ozone and something old, like dust after a rain. His eyes fluttered open. They were brown. Human. Tired. He looked at her, confused, lost. The vastness was gone from his gaze. He was just a man again in a place he didn't understand. He croaked, his voice a dry rasp. The download, it stopped. Did we win? Verma took his hand, her own tears falling freely now. Yeah, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. We won. You did it. You saved us. A faint, weary smile touched his lips. Good, he breathed. That's good. His eyes started to close, and for a terrifying second she thought that was it. That he'd given everything. But then his eyes opened again, a little wider, a new urgency in them. He gripped her hand, his strength surprisingly firm. My daughter, he said, the words clear and sharp. Her name, it's... He stopped. His brow furrowed. The urgency in his eyes flickered, replaced by a dawning, horrifying confusion. He looked at Verma and then around the strange organic chamber, a deep and terrible lostness settling onto his face. He started, his voice small like a child's. I had a daughter. The words were a statement. A question. A plea. The grip on her hand loosened. The certainty was gone. He looked back at her, his eyes filled with a sadness so immense it could fill galaxies. I know I loved her, he whispered. But I can't. I can't remember her face. The final twist wasn't a victory. It was a cost. The psionic pulse, the flood of data, the immense strain of channeling the soul of a species. It had saved the memory for the universe. But it had burned it out of him. The man had saved the concept of love by sacrificing his own. He was a hero. A savior. And he was alone in a way no human being should ever be. The war was over. But his battle, the quietest and most terrible one of all, had just begun. The medical bay on the command ship was quiet, a world away from the organic hum of the Sentinel. He lay in the clean, white bed, dwarfed by it, a man who had been a god and was now just a patient. The scans were clear. Physically he was fine. A little malnourished, a little weak. But his mind. The doctor spoke in hushed tones about neural pathways, about synaptic fatigue, about the impossible strain of containing two consciousnesses. They used words like mnemonic erosion and targeted psychic trauma. Verma sat by his bedside, the only one he didn't look at with complete confusion. He didn't know her name, but he seemed to recognize something in her face, a flicker of a feeling he couldn't name. Days turned into weeks. Earth began the long, slow process of healing. The celebrations were quiet, somber. There were no parades for him. How do you celebrate a victory that feels so much like a loss? The news feeds called him the guardian of memory. The man who saved us all by giving up everything that made him, him. He watched the reports on the screen in his room with a detached curiosity, like he was watching a story about someone else. The high command debated what to do. The Sentinel hung in orbit, silent and dark once more. It was the most powerful relic in known space, a key to technologies beyond dreaming. They called it asset optimization. They talked about research teams, about control mechanisms, about harnessing its power. They saw its silent strength and wanted to use it. Verma listened to them in meetings, her stomach tightening into a knot. They were talking about the thing that had already taken one man's mind. They were looking at the tomb of a race and seeing a toolbox. She went to his room one evening. He was staring out the viewport at the star-dusted blackness, his reflection ghostly on the glass. They're talking about going back inside, she said softly, not knowing if he understood. They want to study it. To try and make it work for us. He was silent for a long time. Then he spoke, his voice still rough from disuse. It's tired. It was the most he'd said in days. I know, she said. It doesn't want to be used, he continued, still looking at the stars. It just wants to remember. That's its job. To remember them. And now, to remember us. He finally turned to look at her, and there was a clarity in his eyes she hadn't seen since the throne room. It wasn't the clarity of recovered memory. It was the clarity of simple, profound understanding. They'll break it, he said. Trying to make it work. They'll break themselves. Some doors shouldn't be opened. The next day he asked for a data slate. He spent hours with it, his brow furrowed in concentration, not writing but drawing. When he was done he gave it to Verma. It was a child's face. A little girl with laughing eyes and a smile that was slightly crooked. It was drawn with the shaky, uncertain lines of someone relearning how to make their hand move, but the love in every stroke was unmistakable. It was a memory not recalled but rebuilt. A monument built from the rubble. He couldn't remember her name. He couldn't remember the sound of her voice. But he had remembered the feeling of her. And from that feeling he had drawn a map back to her face. It was the most heroic thing Verma had ever seen. She knew what she had to do. She took the drawing and she went to the council. She didn't bring strategy reports or power readings. She just held up the slate. "This is what we were fighting for," she said, her voice ringing in the quiet chamber. "Not for optimization. Not for silent strength we can weaponize. We fought for this. For the right to be messy and illogical and to love things so much it hurts. That ship out there isn't an asset. It's a grave. And it's a museum. And it deserves to be left in peace." She looked at the faces of the commanders, the politicians. "The strongest thing we can do now is to be what we promised we were. To be worth the sacrifice." There was no vote. Not really. But one by one, the men and women in that room looked from the tactical displays showing the dormant sentinel to the hand-drawn picture of a little girl, and they understood. A decision was made. The sentinel would be left alone. It would be marked as a galactic heritage site, a memorial to two races, one that had died and one that had been saved. No research teams. No attempts to reactivate it. It would be allowed to sleep and to remember. On his last day on the command ship, before he was taken down to Earth to begin a new life he never asked for, he stood with Verma at the viewport. The sentinel was a dark silhouette against the moon. "I don't know who I am," he said quietly. Verma pointed at the drawing of the girl, now framed next to his bed. "You're her father." He looked at it and a small, fragile smile touched his lips. It wasn't a memory of joy. It was a new joy built from the ashes of the old. "Yes," he said. "I suppose I am." He wasn't a warrior. He was a bridge. He was a wound that had healed into a reminder. He had given us the stars not by conquering them, but by showing us what we had to lose if we ever tried. The universe is vast and silent and cold. But it is not empty. It holds memories. And it holds, spinning in the quiet dark, a world of people who finally learned that their greatest strength wasn't in the weapons they could build, but in the things they refused to forget. The love, the art, the messy, beautiful noise of being human. That was the victory. Not over the aliens but over the silence. And it was a victory that would need to be won, not with a shout, but with a whisper, every single day. And that's the story of the man who was more than a warrior. I hope you enjoyed that journey. It's a story that really stuck with me because in the end, it wasn't about the biggest gun or the strongest shield. It was about a choice. The choice to protect a memory instead of a weapon. The choice to be human even when it seems illogical. That's the heart of HFY for me. It's not about humanity being the toughest. It's about us making the choice to be kind, to be curious, to love, even in the darkest corners of the universe. If you like stories that explore that idea, make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell. I've got more tales like this one coming soon, stories where our humanity is our greatest advantage. But for now, I'll leave you with this. Out of all the words in the galaxy, the most powerful might just be, I remember. Thanks for watching. See you in the next story.